Welcome to Proles of the Round Table.
Hello, and welcome to Proles of the Round Table, where we sit down, have a few drinks, and talk leftist history. Check out our new website at prolespod.com, where you can find our back catalog, links to all the resources we talk about, a whole communist ebook library, and like some branded communist like hoodies and t-shirts and stuff. If you want to support us even more, check out our Patreon, where you can give your hard-earned wages to an authoritarian communist podcast in exchange for bonus episodes, clothes, buttons, and that sort of thing. Find out more at patreon.com/Prolespod. So we want to thank this episode's primary sponsor, who enabled us to buy this fancy round table, and is the sponsor for all of our episodes, as some people I'm sure have guessed. So big thanks to our sponsor, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the People's Republic of China. President Xi,
support this podcast.
he already is.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here. So so today we have with us Ty, who is Spirit of 17 on Twitter. What are you drinking today?
Something with fucking lemons in it.
Great, that's good.
All right.
That's a good start.
Could be water.
Yeah, it could be
It could
fucking.
be anything.
I don't even know.
La Croix.
Yeah, it could be.
Hey.
So then we got here at the Decadent Proles Mansion, we've got
The DACA or the
Let's see, we
Dacha or whatever they call it.
yeah, exactly. We have Jeremy. What are you drinking?
So I'm drinking Good River Beer's Gunny, which is a black lager, and I opened it like 2 minutes ago, and it's still foaming over.
This is true. I can confirm.
I don't prefer it.
It's not my fave.
Oh, this is Ezra. I'm drinking apricot La Croix.
Oh,
Staying on
Jesus.
brand.
Nice. I am
Ty?
Justin, and in celebration of reformist capitalist China, I am drinking
Wow.
Bootstrap Brewing Co. Insane Rush IPA.
Wow. Okay. And then I'm your host, Ethan, and I'm drinking a Modelo Especial, which is a golden
Modelo
full-flavored
time.
Pilsner-style lager with a clean, crisp finish. It's brewed in Mexico, so that's exciting. Yeah, cool. So Ty, what are you gonna be talking about, Ty?
Well, essentially, I kind of wanted to just talk about the modern state of China, mainly in the era of Xi Jinping. But I mean, with that comes, branching off into history. I mean, this obviously is a history podcast, so I'll be going into that. And no country in the world is independent of its prior history. Certainly not the People's Republic, even, before the period of the People's Republic. And, I have lived in China for some months, so I'll be going into my own experiences with that. But I'll mostly be drawing, facts and figures from various sources, some Western, some non-Western, and just talking about Xi's role in Chinese Marxism and what he's brought to the table, and where China has come from and where China might be going.
So, I guess tell us about your experience. Like, what brought you to the People's Republic of China? What was your experience with it up to this point?
So, essentially, some years back, I was in community college, and at that time, I was like a Bernie bro before Bernie existed. Well, maybe I shouldn't say existed.
Nice.
He's old as fuck. Yeah, I was born before
Damn,
Bernie, by the
Ty
way.
old as hell.
But before, well, I shouldn't even say before anyone gave a shit about him. That's a little bit rude. But
Right.
before 2015, I'll say that. Before
Okay.
2015.
Nice.
And
Nice.
even then, it was very basic Bernie bro type shit, disillusionment with the Democratic Party, and but not really all that far left. Just kind of oh man, I wish we had better
Sure.
healthcare and shit. Which it's not a bad thing to ask for, but it's not like I was
No.
carrying around portraits of Stalin or anything.
Yeah.
Not yet.
We
yet.
all
Yeah.
we've all come from
Came from the bottom.
Yeah, started from the bottom. Now
Exactly.
we're here.
Exactly.
We all got to start somewhere, especially in the fucking United States of America.
Indeed.
But what I started doing in community college was I started volunteering with the international students that we had at our college, and the vast majority, at least where I went to college, came from China. And there was a nearby university, which is the university I'm involved with now, and the vast majority of the students came from China. Like that was the number one country where we got foreign exchange students. And so doing that, like I worked not just with the students and, loved hanging out with the students and learning about their perspectives on things and practicing a little bit of Chinese. But I was approached by a professor who said, hey, the school used to do a program where students from this uh, college who were eligible got to actually go to China and teach for about half a year at a private university over there, help English teachers anyway. And so I was really excited to
Nice.
do that, and so I fought tooth and nail to get into that program. And I was like, there were over 20 applicants. I was one of 4 who actually
Damn.
got to go, and that, like, it was. He approached me in about like I'd say late 2015, early 2016, and we didn't actually go until 2017. So it was a long
Wow.
process. But over the
Sure.
course of that process, like I started reading more like Marxist literature and that kind of thing. So I didn't consider myself like an ML or anything like that, but I was still somewhat familiar with like Marx and Engels themselves and that kind of thing. But I thought of China as like, oh, they were communist under Mao, but then, Deng Xiaoping came along and fucked it all up, and now China's a capitalistic hellhole. But
Right.
actually going there really just changed a lot of my own perspective of China, and like just being there showed me that there are so many things I just assumed about China, even from like a Western standpoint, that we get told in the media a lot that are just flat out not true, and that China is a
Right.
much more dynamic and diverse and really thriving country than the hive mind that we're told that it is by like CNN and John Oliver and people like that.
Which is, I mean, racist as
Oh,
fuck.
Right.
abso-fucking-lutely. It's really just like I think you can draw a fair line between the yellow peril and the Oriental hordes of like the late
Oh
1800s.
yeah.
That's
Oh
still
yeah.
going on nowadays. Like Edward Said is fucking spinning in his grave
Yeah.
over the fucking
Exactly.
Open Oriental. He was like, "You fuckers have learned nothing."
Nothing. Yeah.
Well, as long as we're looking for renewable energy sources to help cut down on carbon emissions, like him spinning in that
I was
grave
about to
may,
say, like, hook up a
Whoa.
generator to that dude.
Hey.
I mean, he's not using it.
Yeah.
He's not using his body anymore. We can fucking use it.
Yeah. It's not exploitation if they're
What the
dead.
hell is he gonna do? Yeah.
No, but that's really that. Yeah, that's interesting. You say about like actually moving there and learning for your own. It's like Mao says, no investigation, no right to speak.
Indeed, you would not
Wah.
believe how fucking often I get to whip that shit out. Well, and what's really interesting is that, like, even from a leftist standpoint, kind of what I'd heard a lot from some people about like China, because I tried to read a little bit about the modern history of China before I went. Of course, you can go and learn about the ancient history there all you want. The city I stayed in was a city called Xi'an, which is in a place called Shanxi province. And it's pretty, like, it's near central China. It's not exactly central China, but it's pretty dang close to there. It's not that far from, well, actually, it is kind of far from Beijing, but compared to like Shanghai or some of the more southern cities, it's not. And it's a huge city. And up until about 200 years ago, it was the capital of China. So you have all those dynasties that have their history there, and there's tons of awesome history museums in that city, and it's a wonderful place, and I love it absolutely. I also visited Beijing for about a weekend, which is really cool. I'd love to go, back to Beijing and spend more time there. But another city I visited was Yan'an, which, if some of y'all know some of the history about that, and if I'm speaking too fast, just let me know because I've been told that I do that.
No, you're
No,
good.
you're good.
I grew up in Oklahoma, and we talk at the speed of fucking light. So
No,
yeah,
you're good.
at least I don't have that
No,
southern
can
drawl.
you? That's true. Can you talk about Yan'an a little bit?
Yeah, no, I'd
'Cause
love
I know
to.
it's
Um,
for those of you who know
yeah,
about
for
like
those
the
unawares,
pre-revolutionary China, you may be like,
what the fuck is that?
yeah.
But for those unawares, Yan'an was basically the headquarters of the People's Liberation Army during World War II. Now, when I say World War II, most people think 1939 to 45, but the Japanese invasion of China was obviously way before 1939. I believe it was actually like in China they call it like the 8 Years' War, something like that. There's actually a huge museum in Yunnan where their headquarters used to be. And some of the bunkers that they stayed in are actually still there. Like you can go and see the bunkers where like Mao and Zhou Enlai and those people actually lived back in the 30s and 40s when they were
Wow.
conducting the war against the Japanese, mostly a guerrilla war. And there's a huge.
Proles pod trip to China win.
Oh, it's on our way. We'll stop there on the way to the DPRK.
Well, yeah, I mean, fucking, it's awesome. I mean, you should visit it if you get the chance. It's a wonderful place, and they get no foreigners there. Like everyone was kind of shocked to see me there because it's not a place that gets foreign tourism. It's
Sure.
it's not small by American standards. It's like just over 1 million people, but it's small by Chinese standards. You have to keep in mind this is a country of 1.3 billion people, most of
Right.
whom live in the cities. So it's small for their standards, but not for mine, obviously. But it's really cool. They get not a lot of foreigners there. They do get domestic tourism, usually aspiring Communist Party members who
Nice.
come to this area and, kind of pay homage to, the efforts of the revolution there. There's a huge, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a statue, but it's more like embedded into the wall. I don't know the fancy word for it. I don't know shit about art. But
We're gonna do an episode on
I
that.
was like,
in another
You'll
yeah,
know
month.
every-
yeah.
We're gonna do an episode. You'll know everything.
I
you need
should
to
have
know
watched
about
that
it.
one, yeah.
Oh, it hasn't happened yet. So
Oh
you're good.
boy. But with that one, there's, it's got like all these figures of the revolution, that kind of thing, in the war against the Japanese, and all day people will come in and like lay wreaths and flowers to it and that kind of thing. And it was just really cool to see all these people, and they were usually older folks too, like not a whole lot of young people, but it was really cool to see that. And the thing about Yan'an is that it's nestled in this mountain range where in ancient times they would just build their homes right into the mountains so they don't really stick out, and that kind of helped the Chinese forces keep themselves camouflaged, because if you were to fly a plane over it, like nowadays you would see buildings, but like back in the day you would just see the mountains. Like they're
Nice.
pretty much, it's kind of like a cave system basically. They're built into the side of the mountains and you wouldn't see them from like a bird's eye view. And it's right next to a really big river. I think it's China's second largest river. It's called the Yellow River. But that place is beautiful and it's really a sight to see. And Yunnan was just so damn cool to see for myself, and all the people there, and those museums are awesome. There was a really cool communist themed bookstore that for some reason had Animal Farm in 1984 for sale in it, and I was really pissed the fuck off about that.
Revisionism.
But
I
I
changed
was
my mind.
under-
China
I
is
was
revisionist.
All right, this episode's over.
but I had been told that those books were banned in China,
Huh.
and I'm like,
What-
well, to be fair, it wasn't among like it was the section that it was part of was just called Western Classics, and which again,
I mean, like,
fuck
I
that.
guess.
But
Yeah.
it was among like Charles Dickens and like Homer and like kind of just generic like white people like this shit, so you should read it, like.
So stuff you read in like a high school.
Pretty
English
much,
class.
yeah. I think there was even like John
Okay.
Steinbeck.
Nice.
Critical support for grapes. of
Yeah,
Wrath.
exactly. Thankfully, not Catcher in the Rye. I fucking hate that book.
I also dislike Catcher in the Rye. So, no, that's super cool. Yeah, thanks for telling us about that. So, what's going on in China right now? No, what's the deal with state
I
capitalism?
was, that's not an open-ended question at all.
No, I know. I guess so. Specifically, if we want to narrow that down, like, what is, in your experience, like, what is the actual, like, what are the differences? Sorry, this is also a huge question. Like, in terms of the political, economic system and how we understand it in the West, or how most of us understand it in the West, like, what were the biggest shocks to you when you were there?
The biggest shocks to me.
Like the most surprising things about how things actually were, as opposed to what you'd been told or what people think is
What I
going
had
on
heard.
there.
Well, I mean, first of all, later if you want to get into like, is China socialist or capitalist or whatever, like I'd be more than willing to go into that. later and draw some
Well, yeah,
figures.
we
But
100%
to
need to
start
talk about
with,
that.
well, I was under the impression that we hear about like the surveillance state, which
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
mean, living in the U.S., I suppose we should know what that means, but um, it was way less severe than I had been told it was. Like I had been
Sure.
told by some people, like you can't talk about politics. Like if you do, they'll like hush you or give you like that little cutting off your head motion that they do when like they're moving their hand and shit. But like a lot of people were
In a
very open to
movie.
talk
Yeah.
politics, and
Nice.
it's not like when I ask people like, "What do you think of the government?" All of them were like, "Oh, we love them, haha." Like,
Right.
yet nervously look around for like a secret policeman in the bushes, like kind of staring at them and shit. Um,
Right.
in the cities, people had a much more like diverse view. It was interesting among young people my age, fucking millennials and shit. Um, there was a lot more. I never really encountered. I think I only encountered one person who just openly said they did not like the Chinese government.
Yeah.
But it was more along the lines of like, yeah, I like this thing that they're doing, but I'm not so fond of that thing that they're doing, which is
Sure.
pretty fucking normal for any country.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
But when you
Sure.
talk
Yeah,
to like older
absolutely.
folks, they're much more supportive of not just the government, but like socialism and communism in general.
Yeah.
And you kind of get the same reaction if you go out to the countryside, which I did a
Okay.
couple times. Yan'an, there's a lot of rural areas around Yan'an, and we stayed with a friend's family, and I met her great grandfather who was like this 80, 90-year-old dude who became an electrician during the 60s when the village first got electricity. And he had like a
Nice.
massive fucking rug with Mao and Zhou Enlai on it that was hanging on his
Sweet.
wall. And I was
Nice.
like, damn, dude, you're fucking rad. And he didn't speak a word of English, but he tried his absolute best to teach me how to play Mahjong.
Oh,
Of course, I got
nice.
fucking creamed
Nice.
because
Of
I can't
course,
play
of
board
course.
games for shit. Um,
Shameful.
But yeah, that was probably my biggest. Like we hear about, it really does go back to that kind of Oriental idea of the hive mind where everyone's so tightly controlled, like somehow the Chinese government has robots that burrow into your brain and prevent certain words from
Right.
appearing in your mind and shit. Um, but it totally isn't like that. There's a lot more freedom of discussion and especially debate that is going on in that country. For example, one of the most popular TV shows is for young people, and they debate like social issues of the day, not necessarily related to like Marxism, but more related to like, what like when is the right time if you're LGBT to come out to your parents?
Hmm.
Which
Hmm.
like
Well,
LGBT issues are like um, a big issue for like Chinese youth today. Like a lot of the
Yeah.
older
Okay.
generation is just kind of like homophobic, which makes sense because despite the adoption of Marxism and all that, there's still a lot of like you can't annihilate 5,000 years of like homosexuality is wrong overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with the current generation, there has been a big push for LGBT acceptance. The Communist Youth League actually issued a thing where they said that homosexuality is absolutely not a mental disorder, which some more conservative elements and have said even within the Communist Party itself, but they're considered more like the right wing faction. But yeah, it's not necessarily a government versus people thing. It's more of like a youth versus the older generation thing, which every country
Okay.
goes through. But that's with,
Yeah.
social issues in general. And like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that ties into the next question I wanted to ask, which
Oh,
is
yeah, go
just
for it.
sort of what's how would so at the very beginning you mentioned like talking about China in the era of Xi Jinping, and I just wanted to ask like what defines China, like what defines the Xi Jinping era, like what are the main like bullet points for Xi's time as the
Chairman.
ruler.
Well,
Yeah.
he is the chairman of the Communist
The
Party and he's
dictator of
the
China.
president of
Right,
China
right.
and all that. But I would say the programs that separate his um, administration from past administrations are, among other things, the anti-corruption drive that's been going
Hmm.
on in China right now. Because the last two administrations of Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, Jiang Zemin came after Deng Xiaoping, and Hu Jintao came in after him. But Hu Jintao ended up actually resigning, and the things relatively fluctuated in terms of how satisfied people were and like workers' rights and that kind of thing during their administrations. There was an overall buildup of bureaucracy and as a result, corruption. And a big part of Xi's administration has been getting rid of that. And it's very popular among people in China, like ordinary people. And as such, they have a
Sure.
whole lot of faith in him and that kind of thing. And he's very highly regarded among them. But you get a lot of wealthier elements of Chinese society, as well as party members who fiddle around and that kind of thing, who are much less fond of the anti-corruption drive, and as such, they get the bigger voice in Western media, who are
Right.
saying like
Right.
it's not actually an anti-corruption drive; it's just Xi purging everyone who disagrees with him.
Right. Yeah. Silencing his political enemies or whatever.
Yeah,
What sort of policies are like implemented in the anti-corruption thing? Is it just a party purge or
well,
what you know
not
what's going on there?
necessarily. That's part of it. There's definitely like more legal actions being taken against party members who are engaged in money laundering or fraud or that kind of thing, like usually resulting in jail. Which when was the last time a politician went to prison in the United States? Out of all
Right.
the ones who fucking should. Um, One policy in particular that got a bit of attention in the West was what they're calling a pay cap, which it was directed at addressing the growing of wealth inequality, or the growth of wealth inequality, I should say, which did definitely increase during the last two administrations before Xi, not just in the private sector, but even in the state-owned sector as well, because the Chinese economy is really kind of divided up into two areas: the private sector and like the state-owned enterprises. And the state-owned enterprises do really pull most of the weight in China, but that's not to say the private sector is anything to sneeze at. And
Sure.
I'm quoting from an article from World Finance, which calls itself the voice of the market, so it's probably not a pro-communist source by any means, but this article is called "The Land of Less Pay: China Combats Corruption Through Cap." And it is a very critical article. Like it definitely takes the line of, oh, this isn't actually an attempt to fight corruption, it's just Xi consolidating his power. But and I think it was published in 2014. That's who it is, November of 2014. And the pay cap policy is essentially, I'll read from the first paragraph here. As part of the country's 2-year anti-corruption drive, Chinese authorities imposed an upper limit on executive pay in September, and in doing so looked to rectify a number of employment market inefficiencies. In keeping with the ruling administration's commitment to clamp down on state corruption and restore balance to the labor market, the world's number 2 economy has agreed to legislation that its European counterparts could not quite stomach. And then the article goes into how there was a proposal in Switzerland, or no, sorry, a referendum. Well, it was a policy proposal, but they did a referendum on it, and it was basically it was to limit executive pay, and the cap was executive compensation should be no greater than 12 times that of what the lowest paid employee earns, and 65.3% of the Swiss public said it was a bad idea.
That sounds authoritarian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
We don't want to do that.
yeah, exactly.
Because we might be those rich people.
How
one day.
dare people have golden yachts and shit? I mean, or how dare they not have that?
dare they
How dare they
not have
not
golden
have that
yachts?
shit? Exactly.
Exactly.
And
They should have the opportunity to exploit to the maximum potential because that's what freedom is.
exactly. And
Yeah. A more democratic one would be 300, like an average of 300 times.
Yeah.
the
yeah,
that's-
and even then,
yeah.
that's pushing it.
caseworker.
Like at that point, you're just stealing. You're just greedy.
Exactly.
You're greedy if you want to put a cap on how much someone can make.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Freedom.
But the Chinese pay cap was actually a lot lower than that, because Chinese executives on average make a lot less than Western executives. Like,
Okay.
this is from Yahoo Finance. They said that before, well, like I said, it increased over the last two administrations. So in 1983, you had a 10-to-1 pay gap from CEO to average worker.
Jeez.
Yeah, but by the early 2000s, that had increased to the hundreds. And so right now, that led to a lot of upset, not just by working class people in China itself, but even kind of all around the world. But what China is doing right now is returning to that 110 limit. And the plan is to bring it down even further in the future. But like I said, it's not been very many years since they instituted it, so we don't know where they're going to go from there. As for other things, these are figures from the Central Commission for Discipline and Inspection, which says that by 2014, when the anti-corruption drive was started in 2013, or really kind of more in 2012, but Xi Jinping did not formally become the chairman of the Central Committee until 2013, more than 182,000 party officials were legally punished for corruption-related charges, which is huge numerically. But keep in mind, the Communist Party has over 90 million members.
Right.
So
Are you aware of like if the rich hated him, how did he end up becoming chairman?
I would say they do hate him, but I would also say that it doesn't work the same way it works in the United States, where in order to become a highly elected official, you have to win over the wealthy, because at the end of the day, the Communist Party is not widely populated by the wealthy. The vast majority of Communist Party members come from usually farming backgrounds. Like over 70%, I think, is the statistic on that, but I can find it here. I have a big list of sources that I have, and I just gotta find shit.
No, yeah, and we'll have you send that to us, and we'll put it
No,
in the
yeah,
thing so
absolutely.
everyone
Y'all
can
should
read it.
definitely
But
check it out.
no, that's really interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about kind of the structure of the Communist Party and its relation to like the ruling, like how China is governed?
No, yeah, absolutely. It's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking, well, if a capitalist class exists, which it certainly does, then it must be the one entirely in charge, because that's how it is in the West or in Western democracies. Like, you read Marx, you hear about society is basically the domination of one class by another, and in like a
Right.
bourgeois democracy, it's the capitalist class who uses the organs of political power to dominate everybody else, and that's certainly true in the
Right.
United States. But in China, it's a whole different story. You can actually be legally punished for taking money from like private companies and private initiatives and that kind of thing. Basically, if you flirt too much with the private sector, you're out of the party.
Damn.
And which,
Nice.
like, I'm really a big fan of that. But in regards to how it's managed, I'm going to quote from a Twitter thread by a guy who I'm going to be quoting a lot from. His name is Ian Goodrum. Do any of you guys know him?
Hell yeah.
He
Yeah.
is
We're
He
big-
follows the pod.
Excellent. What?
Yeah.
Said he follows the pod.
Yeah,
Excellent.
he
Y'all
follows
should
us
have
on
him on
Twitter.
sometime.
Shout out to
I
Ian
mean,
Goodrum.
I don't mean to like steal his thunder or whatever, but he has written a lot of excellent stuff on the workings of China's government and that kind of thing. He writes some pieces for China Daily. I don't know if he works for them or not, but like I've seen a few of his articles on there. For the uninitiated, China Daily is that country's #1 English language news outlet, and it's pretty good. So but they're all pretty good, like Xinhua and People's Daily. Half the time it's about generic world affairs, and the other half it's like cute puppies and shit. Like if
Yeah,
you,
no, that's a great follow on
yeah, I'm
Twitter.
like, y'all are plugging the
'Cause
wholesomeness.
you get like cute, heartwarming like animals, and then also news.
Yeah, exactly. What could be better? But this is from a
Literally.
thread by Ian Goodrum. It's titled, "There is no such thing as a private sector that's independent of politics. It does not exist." Which, of course, it's true. And most people who write about China's economy focus, not just on the private sector, but on the state-owned enterprises. And since over the decades, the state-owned enterprises have shrunk, at least in their percentage of how much of the economy they take up. A lot of people are saying, okay, they're moving away from a planned system and more towards like a neoliberal type thing. But what Ian talks about, or Mr. Goodrum, I don't know what I'm allowed to call him, he just seems way more important than I am on this shit.
I believe you need Esquire at the end of it.
I'll just quote directly from him. "Leaving aside the control the government exerts on private enterprises through the stock market and joint ventures, these commenters," he's referring to like pundits and that kind of thing, "underplay the importance of Communist Party committees in firm level governance," which is a thing that they have. Every big private enterprise in China has a Communist Party committee that makes sure that everything they're doing is in line with, the law of the land and that kind of thing. And in the event that they break the law, usually what happens is the enterprise gets taken from them, all their capital gets taken from them, and it becomes a state-owned enterprise. In fact,
Nice.
there have been a couple cases, even before Xi Jinping, like in Hu Jintao's administration, where a lot of Chinese capitalists were crying in the foreign Western media about the fact that their mines had been taken and nationalized because of worker accidents and deaths. But like
maybe the wrong time to do the hype button.
they, well, what
deaths.
happened?
Nationalizing.
Yeah, but he said workers' deaths. And I was
Oh.
like, wah, wah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
What had happened in these was, they have these, like, mining is a big part of China's economy. And so what had happened was some of these private firms, these were privately owned mines and that kind of thing. I guess they were more lax on safety standards and that kind of thing than the state-owned ones were. And it wasn't even that huge amount of workers who died, but I think it was like over a dozen in this particular incident. But essentially, it was nationalized. They didn't pay them anything. Like they didn't
Nice.
buy it back from
Yeah,
them or
there's
none of
the
that
hype
shit.
button
They
time.
just took it and said, you know what, you fucked up. You clearly can't. You don't know how to run this, so we're gonna do it now. And one of them cried in like an Australian news outlet. He said something like the Chinese government is raping private enterprise. That's what he said.
Sounds like an
and I'm
ANCAP.
like, Jesus H, that's dramatic, dude. And it's crazy how much they'll get a lot of attention in the Western media.
Right,
These
of
foreign,
course.
capitalists who will come over and write news articles and talk in the news about how the big bad government came in and took their mines because people wouldn't stop dying in them and shit. And unions play a big role in this too. I'll talk about unions in a little while, and the role
Okay.
that unions play, especially what's known as the All China Federation of Trade Unions. There's one article which is particularly good, which ironically comes from a website called Trickiest Platform, which like
No!
I know exactly when someone first sent me the link to this, I was like, "Are you fucking sure? This is not going to be good. I'm about to read a whole bunch of infuriating shit." But
Right.
it was really interesting. Apparently this is based out of Australia. This particular website, but it's called Workplace Safety.
So it's probably ironic.
Heyo.
Hey.
It's called Workplace Safety Now Better in China Than in Australia. And I'll quote from a couple of
right.
paragraphs. It's a pretty damn long article. Like it's a big read, but I think it's well worth reading about if you want to gain an understanding of like how the I shouldn't say central committee, but how the Communist Party in general exercises its control over the private sector. That's a great article for that. Most of it relates directly to Australia, so there's not a lot of good comparisons with, say, the United States, but it's pretty good, It's really good reading nonetheless, and it's interesting to see how, like, a capitalist country that's considered very developed like Australia is doing in terms of, like, workplace safety and union representation and, like, how capitalists are treated in the legal system versus, like, the People's Republic of China.
Right, and I think that's sort of one of those big things that when people are like, "Oh, China is capitalist now," they've strayed so far from Mao's foundations or whatever that they're no longer you can no longer consider them socialist or communist or whatever. But I can't imagine anywhere else in the world where one, rich people go to jail.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
two, politicians go to jail, end up imprisoned for their crimes. It just doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, and look at, like, is there any other country in the world where Marxism is so intently studied?
right.
Like, it is part of
exactly.
the core.
Norway.
Oh, Jesus.
Shout out to the Netherlands.
The Nordic model. We just need the Nordic model.
Right. Yeah.
But, I
Third
mean,
way.
she talks a lot about Marxism. He himself has a doctorate in Marxist philosophy. And under his administration, Marxism has actually become a core requirement of Chinese education.
Nice.
Like when you have to study it in high school, you have to study it in university.
Good.
Which like I
Killing it.
fucking wish we had that shit over here.
Right.
I mean, there's this idea of like, oh yeah, we talked
Yeah,
we've
we've
talked
talked
about
about
this
it
on
a
a
few
couple
times.
episodes. Is that this idea that like, well, listen, I don't understand. Like, most people don't understand Marxism because they didn't go to college.
Right.
Like, you think they talk about Marxism on the fucking college?
Right.
Like,
Or on the other hand, like you go to American universities and all you get is a bunch of like dirty Marxists who are gonna like corrupt you, and that's why.
I wish.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I was like, I think I've met 3 people that I would say in some way, shape, or form, as professors, were communist, socialist,
Wow.
Marxist, anything.
That's
anything in
3
that
more than
realm.
I've ever met.
And yeah, right. I mean, it's not common. I think if I'd gone to a different university or a different department, then I would have met none.
I
Shout out to Hyder.
I literally had I love sociology and that kind of thing. I originally wanted to major in that, but I decided not to. But I took a lot of sociology classes, a few years back, and I had one particular professor who would be like, "Yeah, Marx wrote a lot about sociology, but look at North Korea." And then he would show that fucking picture of like it's supposed to be of them at night, where like South Korea's all lit up and there's
right,
fucking
yeah.
nothing on the northern part of the peninsula, which is like a crude fake. And
Sure.
just showed that to the whole class and was like, "This is why we don't really give a shit about Marx anymore." And I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ.
I was taking a macroeconomics class in college, and I mean it was a particularly reactionary college, which I don't need to get
Shocker.
into. But like this class was he showed a picture of he showed that picture with like the blacked out country, and it was like, yeah, and then this is what not having a free market gets you, and he was like, and what do you all notice about this? And like, I wasn't even a communist at this point, but I was like a sock jock. I was like, well, hey, they don't have any light pollution, and he was like, and someone else was like, what is light pollution? I was like, it's like when, are you serious? He's like, that sounds like something liberals made up. Like, that sounds like something we made up to make fun of liberals. It's like, are you serious? So anyway, yeah.
Well, I mean,
Amazing.
you can still make fun of liberals, but I mean, I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, but from the left.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, it's like you talked earlier about like, how they've strayed from the path of Mao and that kind of thing. First of all, like if you are ever on social media and you see someone with like a Mao profile picture, I guarantee you they fucking despise China.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
is super ironic.
We know.
And they're like, those fucking rotors, I hope they get fucking,
Right.
invaded and bombed and shit.
Yeah,
Fucking-
dangoids.
It's actually,
Dangoids is
here's
my
what's interesting.
favorite.
Everyone pronounces it dang. It's pronounced dung.
Dung.
Like
Okay.
Deng
It's Deng
Xiaoping,
Xiaoping.
Deng Xiaoping thought.
Deng
I
Xiaoping.
I
Great.
do not like the word dungism because to me it's like Assadism or Stalin.
Right,
like
right.
did he
Right.
invent his own ideology? Like they talk about Deng Xiaoping theory, which was basically just Deng Xiaoping applying his own understanding of Marxism to China, like that. But that's how like
Right.
Chinese people talk about it. They never say,
Right,
"Oh,
and I-
we had Maoism," and then Deng Xiaoping came and was like, "I've got a brand new ideology."
Right.
Like none of that should happen. And it's weird because sometimes I'll see like anarchists and libertarian socialist types be like, "Oh, fucking Deng Xiaoping." I'm like, y'all hate Mao too.
Right.
Like, don't
yeah.
take a side in this Mao Deng Xiaoping conflict that's going on there. Like, don't pretend that y'all are like, yeah, fucking China was
just wanna
socialist
drive
under
a
Mao,
wedge.
but not under
Yeah.
Deng. I'm like, you don't like any of them.
Although I have heard Maoism described as anarcho-Stalinism.
Oh my god. In some ways it is, and I read a really good article. There's a guy who I don't know if you know this guy. His name is Roland Boer.
Yeah.
He lives
Stalin's mustache.
Stalin's mustache. That's a great. What is it? A blog? I don't know.
Yeah, no, Stalin's mustache is a
I don't
blog, but
know
he's
how
written a couple books as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he's actually a professor at Renmin University in Beijing, which is fucking awesome. But he's written a lot of excellent articles about China, and he wrote one article in particular.
Roland Bohr, come on Proles Pod.
Yeah, exactly.
I bet if we asked him, he might.
He probably,
Yeah.
I'm
We're
sure
gonna
he
look into
would.
it.
He'd be pretty cool. But this article is titled, okay, this is a She quote from 2013. Quote, revolutionary leaders are not gods, but human beings. We cannot worship them like gods or refuse to allow people to point out and correct their errors just because they are great. Neither can we totally repudiate them and erase their historical feats just because they made mistakes. End quote.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a
Nice.
really important quote for a lot of Marxism. Like, because unfortunately, in my opinion, people do kind of tend to fall into this great man theory, and like,
Yeah.
we'll say like, oh, this person did nothing wrong or this person did everything wrong, and like usually we're joking around, but there are some
Yeah.
people who do take that to heart, which
Sure.
is not good. But this particular article is titled "On Mao's Deviation," and he makes a good argument that later on in his life in the 60s during the Cultural Revolution, Mao himself kind of deviated from his own line on contradiction that he developed in the 30s, in the
Sure.
sense of like antagonistic versus non-antagonistic contradictions. Like y'all have read about that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And like I think one of my more like favorite Xi Jinping quotes is where he was talking about Mao, and he was like, "We must not do to Mao what Russia did to Stalin." Like
Really,
he
I
was
haven't heard
talking
that
about
one.
like, yeah, no, he was talking about how under Khrushchev or whatever that Stalin's legacy was undermined, and that he was made into this villain, and anything that was wrong with the Soviet Union was blamed upon him.
Yeah.
And all the millions of fake deaths that were placed at his feet.
Billions of fake
Billions.
deaths.
Yeah. It's over. I think it's over. Well, no, I think it's 800 million or something ridiculous
200
like that
million.
now that they.
Read the
who
Black
fuck
Book.
knows? Well, because you know what they do? Like what they've done now is they've taken not only the people who died in the fake famine, they take those numbers, and then they're like, how many people would have been born to the people who died in the
That's
famine? And that's
crazy.
literally how they're calculating now. And
Well,
so
what
that's
I-
why it's now like over
What
100
I remember
million
reading
people.
is that in that particular scholarship, they took not only that, but also like all Russian deaths in World War II.
Yes,
Like, so
yeah, they do that
including
too.
Russians, both military and civilian, killed by the Germans are counted as a death by
Right.
old Joey.
Which is, oh man, we
Are you
could
looking
do a
up that
whole
article?
episode on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And
There's somebody wrote an article. I think it was the Daily Mail, and they were like German victims of the
yeah,
siege
I
of
saw that
Stalingrad.
shit, and I'm like, what
And
are
I
you
was like, the
fucking
fuck?
saying?
The
Jesus.
not you mean
You
Nazis?
mean Nazis? You mean the Nazis that were
How do you be a
besieging
victim of your own
Stalingrad?
invasion?
Right, fucking
Like, you fucking
ridiculous.
invaded the
Fucked up.
country, and like, I'm a victim of people fighting back.
Yes, yeah.
horrible.
Anyway, sorry, we're getting way
No,
off
so
topic here.
I was gonna tie that into something something you said earlier, and it's kind of a big question, and I think we need to address it, and it's something that we all need to talk about as Marxists, as
please.
Marxist Leninists talking about China. Is China socialist?
The big one. This is the one that's gonna make me lose like half my followers on Twitter. 'Cause-
Well, but you'll gain some Proles followers. So
Yay! All right.
hopefully it'll balance
I'm
out.
all. You have to understand. I'm all about the clout. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously,
Oh, of
I
course,
don't
that's
give a
what
shit
it's all
about
about.
actual
Yeah.
Marxism. I'm kidding. It's just about Twitter
Well,
clout.
why
So
do
I'll
you-
say whatever Marxist Twitter wants me
Yeah.
to say. You know.
Why do you think? Yeah, I mean, why do you think we're doing a podcast?
Yeah, I
instead of
was like,
organizing?
Jesus.
Boo.
But no, that is an important question, and it's a very divisive one, not just among like the greater left, but even among Marxist-Leninists, Maoists, and that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Like, I can't really, I couldn't like, I would if I was to argue to like say an anarchist about Chinese socialism, it would take me way longer than it would talking to an ML about it, because like MLs usually understand the necessity of things like the new economic policy of Lenin and that kind of thing, and how we see socialism as a stage, like, or
Sure.
a stepping stone to communism, not like the end in of itself. And to be honest, China doesn't come out the gate saying we are now socialist or we have built socialism.
Yeah.
To ask like, is China socialist or capitalist? Well, there's really neither of those things are the correct answer. Like, in my personal experience, when I've asked Chinese people, do you consider your country a capitalist or a socialist country? I get one of two answers. The most common answer I get is they say, well, we think it's mixed, which is fair.
Okay.
Like I said, this is just my personal experience. I don't have
Yeah, of course.
like census data right in front of me, or whatever. Though there are some interesting opinion polls that were done by non-Chinese pollers that I can send your way about how Chinese look at their government and that kind of thing. But they say,
Okay.
we've got capitalism, but we've also got a lot of elements of socialism. And, they say, we try to take the best of both worlds, as it were, to quote Miley Cyrus.
For another pod.
That's the outro
Yeah,
music.
don't you know that China is influenced by Hannah Montana thought? But
We're gonna do
Jesus.
The
Wrecking
other
Ball
answer I
by Xi
usually get-
Jinping.
Xi Jinping came in like a wrecking ball.
oh,
Alexa,
Jesus.
play Wrecking Ball by Xi
Well,
Jinping.
have you seen that propaganda poster of that dude with like a big sledgehammer, like smashing shit, like bombard the headquarters and all that? That's what that was.
Yeah, nice. There
Miley
we go.
Cyrus is a
There
Maoist.
Done.
There we go.
That's
Confirmed
what I heard.
2018. But the other answer I get is market socialism, which sounds a lot like a contradiction in terms. But
Because it
I
is.
think that Marx himself would kind of disagree because, like we talked about earlier, with a class society, it's all about what class wields what power over whom. We talk about like
Right.
dictatorship of the proletariat and that kind of thing. It's obviously the working class wielding power over the capitalist class, and the capitalist class may still exist, but they're not the ones with all the power. And a lot of Chinese do view their country as a workers' state, or they do view the
Nice.
Communist Party as like an organ of workers' power.
So you're saying, talking to like normal workers in China, they
Just
do view
people
the
in
government
China.
as fundamentally right. As like they view the government as fundamentally for their interests.
Yeah, and,
because if you talk to anybody in the United States, they're not going to say that. They're not going to say like, no, like
What,
the
is
United
America a
States or the
workers' state?
government is not in my interests.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a couple like Stalin's mustache is showing some like he shared some opinion polls from various groups, and the vast majority of Chinese people are pleased with the direction their country is going, and view their government as basically something that holds their interest at heart and that kind of thing. There's also a guy on Medium whose name is let me see if I can find one of his articles.
What about the suicide nets, Ty?
Was that in an Apple?
It was.
one?
It was in a Foxconn. which is like
Foxconn.
a-
You know what's interesting? When you go and read these ones about, I've been reading some articles about unions and how that works in China and that kind of thing, and Foxconn comes up more than anybody else. They're based out of Taiwan. And I
Shocking.
know, right? Those fuckers. Which, how are they based out of a country that doesn't exist? Like, like how the fuck do they do that? Like I saw Xi Jinping like in front of a Chinese and Israeli flag. I'm like, how the fuck did he get somewhere that isn't even real? But like,
That's the power of
It's too spicy.
Marxism Leninism.
yeah. Well, it's it's like Thanos. I don't know, but fucking she is Thanos. Foxconn has actually, I've seen more legal battles being waged against Foxconn by what is known as the All China Federation of Trade Unions, which is the largest federation of trade unions in China itself, but it is not an organ of the Communist Party. They work alongside the Communist Party and even help dictate policy and that kind of thing. They take place in policy debates, or they take part in policy debates, but they're not themselves not an organ of the Communist Party, but they're still subordinated to like the laws and that kind of thing. Like they're not above the law or anything like that. And the All China Federation of Trade Unions, I believe, was founded before the Communist Party. It was founded in 1921. I don't believe the Communist Party of China, as we know it, was founded until 1927. I want to say, I could be wrong about that year, but I know that the ACFTU was founded in the same decade as the Communist Party, but it was founded before it.
Okay.
So the ACFTU has been doing all kinds of legal battles against Apple and Foxconn, and under Hu Jintao, the last administration, there were a few cases where they took the side of the workers, there were a few cases where they were just ignored, but in Xi Jinping's administration, they have won far more legal battles, to the point where I've actually seen a few articles by Foxconn and Apple representatives who are talking about, like, look at what the Chinese state is doing to us.
Mhm. Yeah.
Forcing us to comply with labor laws and shit like that. How horrible. That's not to say
So just to reiterate, Foxconn is from Taiwan.
yes.
Right? Okay.
Um,
just to
That's not to
just want to
say
get that out. Foxconn is Taiwanese. It's not from China.
no, they're not.
Oh, okay.
But they do a lot. They do have a lot of they do work a lot in China. They have a lot of like
Sure.
plants and they employ a lot of Chinese. But that's not to say that the contradiction of private power versus state power, especially worker power, does not exist. And overall, working conditions are worse in the private sector than they are in the state sector, which makes sense. But again, that is part of one kind of the wishy-washy attitude of the last two administrations,
Sure.
as well as, the current administration starting to finally crack down on that kind of thing. But again, the crackdown didn't really start until about 5 years ago. And
Sure.
they've been,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got Amazon workers peeing in bottles.
yeah,
No, and so it sounds to me like what you're saying about the answer to the question of is China socialist is it's complicated.
Yeah.
well, yeah,
That's-
and no revolution is made overnight. The Chinese
Right.
themselves do not view their revolution as consolidated or even completed by any terms. They don't say we've built socialism. They say we're working towards that. And
Yeah.
a couple interesting things about the developments of China, even like just after the communists seized power, like under Mao and that kind of thing, was I don't know if you've read any of Mao's writings on like what he called New Democracy,
I have not
but
personally.
what he talked about was he pointed out how Marx and Engels wrote about socialist revolutions coming to power in developed Western capitalist countries, but that's not
Sure.
how it turned out.
Right.
You have them popping up in these agrarian countries like China, for example, and Russia that didn't really have fully developed capitalism. And as such, there's that, and a lot of these were like colonies or semi-colonies. So
Right.
what you have is the overthrow of the colonial power, the imperialist power, which is its own struggle in and of itself, that some of the national bourgeoisie or the national, like the former ruling class is going to help out with.
Right.
Not out of a sense of like proletarian justice or anything, but out of like pride. Like nationalist
Right.
pride. And so
Yeah.
Yeah.
once that's a whole revolution in and of itself, but after that, you have to move on to the revolution of like, and of course Lenin wrote a lot about this too. I'm not saying Mao came up with this, but he elaborated on it in some interesting ways. You have the revolution of the proletariat against the ruling class. And Mao even said, like, at the very beginning, we couldn't just expropriate the bourgeoisie overnight because the bourgeoisie as we knew them didn't exist. Mao recognized the importance of the peasantry
Mm-hmm.
in the
Right.
revolution, that kind of thing, which the Bolsheviks had a hard time dealing with.
Right.
But something that's very interesting, I think, about China, and I didn't even know this until recently reading about it, was that even after the Communist Party took power, after the reforms and everything, which was about 40 years ago, late 70s, 1978, I think was the start of the reforms, land never became a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
Like land in China is not a thing that you buy and sell. It's not,
Okay.
Interesting.
it's not collectivized, but it is managed and owned at a village level.
Interesting.
And I have a little bit of personal experience with this myself.
Okay.
Like,
Ty owns land in China.
yeah, exactly. No, I'm like a
Ty's a
cadre.
landlord.
Like I'm a local
You are
village
your own cadre.
I'm a local
Proles
village.
cadre wins.
I'm the head of the village cadre or whatever, and I'm always fucking shit up. But I have a friend. I won't say his Chinese name, but a lot of Chinese people, they'll give themselves English names. Like it's just
Okay.
a thing they do. He goes by Steven. Anyway, he is about my age, a little bit older. But he's a member of the Communist Party.
Okay.
Became a Communist Party member like just last year.
Nice.
Before then he had been a candidate and everything, and he's a really cool guy. But I had left Xi'an for a little while, but I was revisiting this last summer, and he said, "Hey, I hear you're back in Xi'an. I'd love to hang out, and it'd be cool if you could meet my family. If you ever go to China and make friends, like a big thing is you meeting their family. It's just part of
Nice.
the culture over there. The family. There's a big emphasis on like the family unit and that kind of thing." But
Sure.
his family lived about an hour outside of Xi'an itself, and Xi'an is a huge city, so it takes about an hour to drive like from one part of Xi'an to the other anyway, because it's
Mhm.
massive. But we went out to this more rural area, the name of which I can't really remember right now, but I actually had a Twitter thread about this. I
Okay.
think I tweeted about it like the same day that it happened, but I don't remember. But it was pretty damn rural. But as you went out there, you saw like I didn't see any billboards for any private companies or that kind of thing. Like, I wasn't seeing ads for like Starbucks and Dolce and Gabbana like I was seeing in
Sure.
Xi'an, in the big city. But I was seeing tons of like Communist Party slogans and posters like that and that kind of thing. I saw the words like building socialism and socialism with Chinese characteristics come up a lot more.
Nice.
And so these people are all living out there. And of course, I'm just hanging out with Steven and his family. They were super nice. They lived out on this, this farm area that was really beautiful, but it really fucked with my allergies, so I was miserable.
Oh no.
So I was trying to talk to these people about like communism, but meanwhile my face is fucking swelling up. and I look like a monster. So, but we're all having a good time, and there's a lot of other people from the village who come by to visit me because they're really interested in me. They don't really get foreigners out there. Who the hell
Sure.
am I? But I'm just talking to them, and we're all hanging out, and they spoke with really thick accents, so I couldn't really understand them all that well. So I asked my friend Steven, I was like, "Can you like help me, translate some shit or whatever?" And I asked them, I was like, "What do y'all think of the Communist Party? What do you think of the government?" And that kind of thing, because I was curious. I
Sure.
asked this of a lot of people, and it sounds kind of dickish. Like, I didn't go up to random strangers and be like, "What do you think of the government?" Like, "Tell me now." But I would ask people who I trusted, or people who I felt comfortable around. So this was a pretty
Yeah.
cool incident where that happened. Or I shouldn't say incident. That sounds bad, but event.
There was
Fuck
an
it.
incident.
Yeah, the secret police jumped out and nabbed us all. It was pretty bad. Uh, but
Your social credit score fell.
exactly, it fucking
Wah,
plummeted.
wah.
Fucking, I was denied all of the first class seats.
Sad.
But I asked them about it,
Sounds
and
authoritarian.
when you ask people in the city about it, you'll kind of get a more, oh, there's some things I like that they do, there's something they don't like. A much more like kind of mixed view of things. But these were like much old. These people were very old, much older than I was. A lot of them, they just looked like they had been here their whole lives. Like they were much more working class, that kind of thing, much more modest, housing and that kind of thing. I wouldn't say like impoverished by any means, but like you could definitely tell that they had been like farming for probably a whole lot of their lives. But they were very adamant about their support for the Communist Party. They said, "We support the Communist Party," and it wasn't like a wishy-washy, like, "Oh, haha, yeah, we love them," like it was a very resolute, like, we support them. And I was curious, so I asked why. And this one old guy, who I think was the oldest of the group, but he, looked like a hard-working gentleman. I don't know his life story, but
Sure.
he kind of gave me that finger wag. Like when
Uh-huh.
you stick your finger, I'm like, "Oh damn, I'm about to get lectured." He's like, "I have fucking initiated a lecture from an old dude. We're in it." But what he told me was basically, he said, and the first thing he said was the Communist Party saved China.
Well,
Oh
okay.
man.
And you will get this response from a lot of people because there's a whole lot of like, I don't want to say nationalism because that has such a bad connotation, but like patriotism. Because before the People's Republic, the era before that, when you go back to like the 1800s, it's known as the 100 Years of Humiliation or the
Yeah.
Century
Right.
of Humiliation, which is a huge factor in China's image of itself. Like you've got the
Right.
Opium Wars with the British, you've got the Japanese invasion and all that. You've even got like during the Boxer Rebellion, the United States sent troops over there to help out the European powers and that kind of thing. And even after World War II was done, the United States helped out the Guomindang and those guys fight
Yeah.
against the communists. And they say, that was when we were at our lowest. But with the Communist Party in power, we have become like the number two power in the world. Like
Right.
we didn't go the way of the Soviet Union with Gorbachev or anything like that, and all the shit they dealt with when the Soviet Union went away. Um, Life expectancy has all gone up, population has all gone up. That old guy said, he said every generation like since mine has been better
Right.
than
Yeah.
ours. Like, and every like my kids have a higher quality of life than me. Their kids are going to have a better quality of life than them, and so on and so forth. And it was like that would not have been possible without their leadership.
So my question is, I mean, and sure, nothing was perfect, right? But if things were improving under Mao, then why was there a need for capitalist restoration, or quote unquote capitalist restoration?
I think the main reason for that comes not necessarily about the economic situation. Is an interesting dichotomy with the economic situation because during the Cultural Revolution in the cities was way different than the one in the countryside. For example, a lot of things greatly improved in the countryside, and they've kind of continued to improve in the countryside. In fact, the poverty reduction drive that she has been implementing within the last few years has mainly targeted the more rural areas. And I think like 20 million people have been lifted above the poverty line in China in the last few years
Right.
Damn.
because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
those policies. Yeah, but that was kind of the effect of the Cultural Revolution in the rural areas, so it wasn't really all that bad. In the cities, however, it was much more chaotic and bloody. And at the same time, a lot of people were moving into the cities because there was more industrial jobs there and that kind of thing. People were trying to, move away from the peasant farming type of lifestyle that had dominated China for millennia and into the cities. And there was this big worry about the stability of the party's governance because a lot of people, like after Mao and Zhou Enlai died, there was this kind of idea of where the hell do we go from here? Because of the Cultural Revolution, the party was in total disarray, and a lot of people were disenfranchised or very dissatisfied with the way things have been going. And Roland Boer kind of wrote about this in that On Mao's Deviation article, where he says like the Cultural Revolution saw a lot of deviation in the sense of like turning non-antagonistic contradictions into antagonistic contradictions. For example, like there were disagreements within the party and that kind of thing that could have been solved non-antagonistically but got turned into antagonistic contradictions. You have people being executed, and you have expulsions from the party and that kind of thing, and that did a lot of damage to the party itself. So the need for stability came from kind of, if anything, a relaxation of party control over certain parts of the country.
I imagine the Sino-Soviet split also. had a
Oh,
lot to do with it.
absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
In fact, a lot of I actually am very critical of China's foreign policy, and
It's hard to support it. Like honestly, it's so hard to support.
The Sino-Soviet split.
Yeah, it's hard to
Oh.
imagine why
Yeah.
aligning yourself with the Western capitalist countries was somehow better than aligning yourself with the bureaucratic.
right, and I
Soviet
get
Union.
and I get Khrushchev was a fucking revisionist.
Sure.
So fuck Khrushchev.
But like he was better than
but he was
fucking
he's certainly better
Eisenhower.
than exactly.
yeah,
I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Like
Yeah.
it's all this stuff.
We
but
should
yeah,
do
no,
a whole episode on that.
so, we should.
No, I
'Cause,
mean-
like honestly, the Sino-Soviet split was like literally one of the
World
probably one of the
shaking.
like world historical, like one of the most influential events of the 20th century.
And one that not
I would say
many
it's a
people
tragedy.
talk about.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely,
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 100%
100%.
and I mean,
But
If they had stayed closely aligned with the Soviet Union, there probably would not have been the same necessity.
Right.
The-
There
like,
would have been
even-
no
Yeah,
need for
absolutely.
the reforms.
Exactly. Even with
in China.
even with disagreements, like if they could have, even if they'd had disagreements, they could have formed a block,
Right.
and like
They
Strategic.
literally
supported
fought
each
each
other.
other. Like,
Exactly.
Yes, literally,
The
there were border
The
skirmishes.
Chinese communists aligned with Western imperialist powers to fight the Soviet Union. That's
in
some garbage.
Afghanistan. Yeah, that was some
yeah, and
shit.
like I'm not going to defend China's foreign policy
no.
from the sense of, because it's trash. I'm going to be honest,
Mm.
it's bad. And a lot of that comes out of just the sheer pettiness of like accusations of revisionism and that kind of thing, which revisionism is real. I'm not going to say it's not real, but what bugs me is when people get dogmatic about it, because Marxism is not a dogma.
Right.
It's a
Right.
science. And with science, you have to change things up and everything when, new
100.
evidence is presented. But even Deng Xiaoping himself, like, a lot of people compare him to Khrushchev or Gorbachev, which I would argue the Khrushchev comparison makes more sense, but even then I would disagree with aspects of it. Like, in 1990, Deng Xiaoping's son said that my father thinks Gorbachev is an idiot.
Right.
you know?
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
well, there's
which
a
is,
lot of
very
differences
correct.
there, yeah.
Right. I mean, they're like Khrushchev had no reason to go revisionist. There was no reason for him to
Yeah, well,
shift towards to light industry, to get away from Stalin's procedures, other than he wanted a name for himself and he wanted to individually redirect the Soviet Union.
Well,
He had no reason.
Or he wanted to westernize.
Westernize, right? He was desperate to catch
there's a
up with
historical
the
text.
quote unquote.
Have you watched
catch up with the West.
The Death of Stalin
Oh,
by
no.
Armando Iannucci?
Shut the
Jesus,
fuck up.
Shut up.
I didn't think I
Um,
could.
Oh,
No,
it was
don't do
so
it.
bad.
I'm
we were
so
forced
scared.
to watch it by the left media guys. So they
Called out.
they're gonna get gulagged for forcing
Oh,
us to watch
absolutely.
Sorry, guys.
the death of Stalin.
Sorry to apologies to Mitch and Mike.
Mitch and
y'all are
Mike,
getting
yeah.
gulagged.
Re-education time.
Well,
Yeah, but and same same is really true with Gorbachev. I mean, there were certainly needs for reform,
Sure.
but there was not a need
Pizza
for
Hut.
there was no need that nobody needed Pizza Hut and McDonald's in the
Right.
Soviet Union.
Yeah.
They needed reforms, but they didn't need them in the reintroduction of capitalist markets.
Yep.
What?
China, I would argue, was not in that same scenario,
Right.
Especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, and another part of it is that the Chinese, since their revolution came after the Russian Revolution, they very, very closely studied what was going on in Russia.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
why, Mao adapted his stance on the peasantry. And you can even see in the way like Deng Xiaoping talks about the reforms and everything that he was closely analyzing what like Gorbachev was doing and
Right.
how to avoid the collapse of the Soviet Union. Even though it wasn't really a collapse, it was more of like an undemocratic dissolution.
Yeah.
Right, it was a
Because
Yeah.
coup.
people
Yeah,
wanted
coup.
to stick around and they still do, but
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Gorbachev was just like, "Fuck y'all, I'm out of here."
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, he and
I mean,
fucking
USSR, I'm about to head out.
Yeltsin, cursed to be his name.
Yeltsin.
Like
They,
Yeltsin,
they
Yeltsin.
fought a lot at the end, which
Yes.
is ironic, of course. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, to bring it back to talking about comparing Deng Xiaoping to Gorbachev and Khrushchev, though I'm going to focus more on Khrushchev in this. With Khrushchev, you have the secret speech, right?
Right.
The whole secret speech and everything, and what some people have referred to as the de-Stalinization of the Soviet Union and that kind of thing that went
Yeah.
on. And some people have said that Deng Xiaoping did the same thing to Mao. I would not argue that he went as far as Khrushchev did with Stalin, because what Deng Xiaoping himself said about Mao was he said he was 70% right and 30% wrong.
Okay.
And, a lot of portraiture of Stalin got removed from a lot of things, during the Khrushchev era, imagery with Stalin in it was not as big. But even to this day in China, like if you go to like official Communist Party things or, offices or even like people that sell like souvenirs from the Cultural Revolution, you can see still like imagery of Mao.
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
statues of Mao all over the place. Well, I wouldn't say all over the place. There's not as many as I thought there would be. But there are, statues of him and that kind of thing, and he's still pretty highly revered among a lot of people. It's not like Stalin, where there was a huge concentrated effort to utterly demonize him, or to use Lazardo's words,
Sure.
cast a god into hell.
Yeah.
Like that's the word that Domenico Lazardo uses to describe Khrushchev's treatment of Stalin, which I think is pretty apt.
Yeah.
But
And I mean, Mao is on the money, right? Like he's
oh
on
yeah,
the
he's still on
renminbi.
the yuan. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's on. Well, it's interesting. Like the smaller notes, like notes that are worth less than 1 yuan, he's not on, but all the other ones he's on them. And his year of
Nice.
birth and year of death are on there and everything. But
Proles currency win.
exactly.
We're getting there, man. We're getting there.
You mean Proles workers vouchers?
I was about to
Labor
say like
coin?
labor
Labor
vouchers,
coin?
Yeah, labor
Yeah.
vouchers.
labor coin.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even Xi Jinping hasn't been all that critical. I don't think he's talked about Mao directly all that much, except in praise of him a few times. But
Yeah.
the importance of Mao as a revolutionary figure I don't believe, has been diluted. Even if you ask, like when I was talking to, if you talk to older Chinese people, even people who live in the cities, they'll be much, much more supportive of Mao, which is interesting because these are the people who lived, under his rule and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. They'll be very, Mao led this country to victory. He made us a superpower. He saved us from the Japanese and that kind of thing. But with younger people my age, they'll say like, we admire the work he did in fighting the Japanese and bringing the revolution to China, but later in his life he did some stuff that we don't like.
Which is
fair.
Which is
honestly.
fair, yeah. I mean, the Maoists are gonna kill us for
Pol
saying
Pot.
that, but
We're gonna lose a bunch of
for
Maoist listeners.
suggesting
Lose our
that Mao
Maoist
was
followers.
less than perfect, But hey, revolutionaries are not
Do you
gods,
remember
but human
when-
beings.
Do you remember when Mao supported Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge? That
Was that
not
him?
great.
Oh,
Yeah.
he
Or
did.
was that-
Yeah.
It was like right near the end of his life. Like
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was bad.
it's like we said when we were talking to Brett, like I prefer the early Mao. Like
Yeah.
Yeah,
his later work
I
I'm
always
not
say
as-
like early Mao is much better than late Mao. Like
He sold out.
Yeah.
He started recording with Henry Kissinger.
yeah, oh lord.
No, but so the thing I was gonna say real quick, and then we'll move on. I think is that so something you were talking about when we were talking about is China socialist and this complicated idea of all that is that I think a lot of these people who are who have this negative opinion of like having to take the best quote unquote best parts of like both systems or whatever.
Yeah.
Like these people need to read Marx because like in the German ideology, Marx literally says it is only possible to achieve real liberation in the real world and by and by employing real means, that slavery cannot be abolished without the steam engine and the mule and the spinning jenny, serfdom cannot be abolished without improved agriculture, and that in general, people cannot be liberated as long as they are unable to obtain food and drink, housing and clothing in adequate quality and quantity. Liberation is an historical and not a mental act, and it is brought about by historical conditions, the development of industry, commerce, agriculture.
Yeah.
So
Put the
anyway.
100 emoji and everything. Fucking.
Yeah. The fire
No,
emoji.
before we move on, like I'd like to kind of branch off a little bit. Like, it'll be short, but I want to read a quote from
Oh, yeah,
Fidel
go for it.
Castro that he said in the 90s, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Fidel is
about-
always welcome at this table.
Yeah.
I should say I hope so, but people are gonna get mad. They're like, "Oh, Fidel's a dungist, son of a bitch," you know, like motherfucker. But the quote,
Fidel, no, in the Proles canon, Fidel is in heaven at the right side of Jesus. So
well, people are gonna get mad at this Fidel quote, but like, this is a quote from him. I'll begin it, and I quote, "If you want to talk about socialism, let us not forget what socialism achieved in China. At one time, it was the land of hunger, poverty, disasters. Today, there is none of that. Today, China can feed, dress, educate, and care for the health of 1.2 billion people. I think China is a socialist country, and Vietnam is a socialist nation as well, and they insist that they have introduced all the necessary reforms in order to motivate national development and to continue seeking the objectives of socialism. There are no fully pure regimes or systems. In Cuba, for instance, we have many forms of private property. Practically all Cubans own their own home, and what is more, we welcome foreign investment. But that does not mean that Cuba has stopped being socialist."
Boom.
End quote. Bang it, bing it, boom.
Fidel.
Well, and there was one, like I talked about that Leo Zhao guy who writes for Medium. He said, "China wouldn't have to participate in the market as much if you Western leftists had any successful revolutions." And that was like, oh shit.
Yeah. No, that's I made this post on our Facebook. Where I was like, every one of you fucking Maoists who is like, why isn't China supporting global revolution like everywhere in the world? Like, what you're asking for is for millions of Chinese people to die so that they can be more pure and more in line with your ideology. How about you go put your bodies on the line, you fucking assholes?
Well, not
like
only
that's
that,
who
but-
they are. Like they're like, I know I'm not in control of a country and I have no say over what goes on. But please, y'all go ahead and lay your lives down on the line. How about you do it, you coward?
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of people who, a lot of just, not just Maoists, but like a lot of leftists in general talk about like how bad the Chinese state is, and they'll say like it needs to go down. Like if the Chinese
Oh,
state went down
Jesus.
with all its
Oh,
flaws, I
God.
cannot emphasize enough, that would be probably the worst refugee
The worst.
crisis in history.
Not only that, like that's
A country
that
of
is
1.3 billion people that who the hell is going to take them in?
right, and not
You
only
know?
that, like who stands against the United States in terms of
And
like
who's going to replace them?
nobody? Yeah, I mean nobody.
Some
The damn
horrific
nationalists,
reactionary,
Falun Gong.
yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Jesus H, it'd be like 1.3 billion Scientologists.
Yikes!
You know, like-
Yikes!
That's what Falun Gong is. It's Chinese Scientology.
Yeah, I watched a documentary about that.
It is the nuttiest shit. I remember first reading about it. It's like, oh, they just like to meditate, and I'm like, well, that sounds weird. And then I read it, I was like, oh, Jesus, these people
No,
do
no,
a
no,
lot
no.
more than that.
Yeah.
So I think our last question here, and I mean you can talk about it whatever you want, but like our
Will
last
do.
question was just if you want. Our last question was just if you wanted to address some of the major gains and I guess goals of the Xi era, like People's Republic, just to sort of sum up like what's happening there, like why it's valuable, like what is there that we should be like looking for, supporting, talking about.
No, yeah, absolutely. I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about that was briefly touched upon near the beginning, but we didn't go very in depth into is environmentalism.
Yeah.
Nice.
And caring for the
Absolutely.
environment, because that is, I think, a really important issue that needs to be addressed. We're seeing these, all these UN reports come out. How many decades do we have left before we fucking die? Before
Right.
it turns
One and a half.
before it turns into the Earth from fucking Wall-E, like and all that. So I do want to talk about the pollution in the environment and that kind of thing, because China was, in my opinion, justifiably criticized for the amount of pollution that we were seeing, like say a decade
Right.
ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the pollution that we were seeing a decade ago was much more severe than what we were seeing now. And not just like statistically, like you can see it for yourself. I'm gonna pull up a Bloomberg article,
Yikes!
which is not. I know, right? So, but at least it's not like
It's
controlled by
not
the
written by the
CPC or
CPC.
whatever.
Yeah.
If someone wants to accuse Bloomberg of being paid Chinese bots, like they're more than welcome to. But though I have there was one Twitter user who said that the Democratic Party was being run by the CPC, which I was like, damn, I would love the
I would
Democratic
join
Party a
tomorrow.
lot fucking more if that was the case. Don't tempt me. But this is a Bloomberg article from March 9th of this year called China's War on Pollution Will Change the World. I'm going to read from the first couple of paragraphs. China is cracking down on pollution like never before with new green policies so hard hitting and extensive they can be felt across the world, transforming everything from electric vehicle demand to commodities markets. 4 decades of breakneck economic growth turned China into the world's biggest carbon emitter, but now the government is trying to change that without damaging the economy, and perhaps even use its green policies to become a leader in technological innovation. So, as lawmakers attend the National People's Congress, here's a look at the impact of the environmental focus at home and abroad. Here's one interesting statistic. The government's war on air pollution fits neatly with another goal, domination of the global electric vehicle industry. Elon Musk's Tesla,
Friend of the show.
Jesus, might be the best known name, but China has been the global leader in electric vehicle sales since 2015 and is aiming for 7 million annual sales by 2025.
Why can't we buy Chinese cars here in the U.S.?
Exactly. In terms
Yeah.
of greener cars, China's beating out Tesla. So fuck you, Elon.
Nice.
You fucking weirdo. Um,
He's gonna
okay,
call you a
listen.
pedophile on
Elon
Twitter.
Musk is Willy Wonka.
He is.
That's
He is
who
Willy Wonka.
he's gonna send out his own chocolate line and be like, "Oh, children, come to my factory." And it's like,
Except he's
Jesus
never
H.
made anything in his whole life.
I
He only
am
pays other people to do it.
terrified of that man.
I mean, at least he pays people. Willy Wonka had enslaved
He enslaved people from the global south and shit.
right.
I mean, he's
the
it's from fucking
yeah, the-
Lupa Land. It's like, I don't know where the fuck that is. And he's like, well, you don't need
It's
to
in
know,
the South
buddy.
Pacific. He enslaved them. Yeah.
Yikes.
Literally though, he in oh my god, there's Willy Wonka should be fucking shot.
Gulag.
Exactly, just fucking throw him in a trench or some
Yeah.
shit.
Well, they China is planting a forest the size of fucking Ireland.
They're
that's
having the
thing they're doing.
military do it.
Yes, exactly.
Our
They're
military
paying
is
their
out
military
killing
forces
brown
to do it.
kids and shit. Their
Right,
military is
exactly.
planting trees, but yeah, they're the threat to global security.
Yeah.
There's some more articles that I have. This one is an academic article from a journal. It's from the Asia Pacific Journal Japan Focus.
Okay.
And it's a bit old. It's from 2014. But the article itself is titled China, or the paper, I should say, is titled China's Continuing Renewable Energy Revolution Global Implications. And this one is really numbers heavy. So if you're a big
Okay.
fucking nerd and you're into that shit, then feel free to look at this one. There's tons of graphs and charts. And it does go really in depth. It talks about electric power capacity, the decrease in coal emissions and the use of coal in the economy and that kind of thing, and the growth of electrical power systems and solar power and all that capacity, as well as investment trends into fossil fuels versus hydro, wind, solar, and nuclear and stuff like that. And it's a really, really good article. I'm sure I can give you guys links to all of these once we're
Yeah. We'll put it in
done
the
with all
show
this, but it
notes.
is really important. Okay, I'm going to quote from the Bloomberg article here. So, quote, 5 years ago, Beijing's air apocalypse unleashed criticism of the government so searing that even Chinese state media joined in. Chinese state media criticizes their government a lot more than you'd think. Fuck off, Bloomberg.
Sure.
Last year, the capital's average daily concentration of particles was almost a third lower than in 2015, compared with
Damn.
declines of about a tenth in some major other cities. The turnaround isn't just limited to improving air quality. China has stopped accepting shiploads of other countries' plastic and paper trash, a response to public concern over pollution and a decreased need for scrap materials. As Xi pushes a greener approach, officials at every level of government are working to put his words into action. The government has set up a special force, or police force, I'm sorry. So damn green fucking enviro cops. Captain Planet shit. And polluting factories have been closed. Officials obediently banned coal, sending natural gas sales surging before backtracking after supply shortfalls left many areas in the cold. Sorry. So there is still some coal activity, but like it is being cracked down upon and is decreasing very rapidly. And this is very important as like it's fascinating to see like 10 years ago we would think of, under the Obama administration, maybe the United States is moving towards greener policy with the, Environmental Protection Agency, while, China under Hu Jintao is just like polluting the whole fucking planet. Well, now you've got Trump who's like, climate change ain't fucking real, it's all Jesus. And you've got Xi Jinping who's like, no, we need to fucking turn this shit around right now.
Yeah.
So, if anything, I read one article that said, if anything, it's the United States that needs to catch up to China
Yeah.
on renewable energy and green energy and that kind of thing.
Yep.
But that I would say is the biggest deal because, China is still part of the Paris Climate Agreement and everything, which the United States is like, meh. There's a lot of studies done about this by like Nature Geoscience and that kind of thing. I think even Greenpeace has done some stuff on this, but take that as you will. But like I said, there's lots of interesting information about how China has been tackling renewable energy and pollution, that kind of thing. And they've, in my opinion, been doing an amazing job, much better than any of the shit the United States is doing, or even like a lot of Western European countries are starting to fall short of China's, um, their decrease in fossil fuel output versus renewable energy.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That plus the anti-corruption drive has been big staples of Xi Jinping's policy.
So as we're talking about the Xi Jinping era and Xi era, People's Republic of China, could you talk a little bit about, I guess, China's role in Africa, and then in a more broad, because that's something that gets brought up a lot, and then in a more broad sense, the Belt and Road Initiative, which some of our listeners may have heard of?
No, yeah, absolutely. I guess the first thing I would start with is the Belt and Road Initiative because that really is kind of right now the gold standard for China's foreign economic dealings. Not
Okay.
just in Africa, but like especially in Central Asia. Like the Belt and Road Initiative, like China has been doing some deals with like some European countries and that kind of thing, but mostly it's based in Central Asia, and also there's a lot of economic activity in Africa. But I guess to start with, I'll talk about the Belt and Road Initiative and then transition from there into Africa because it is, important. So the
Yeah,
Belt and
absolutely.
Road Initiative is essentially like China's calling it the biggest economic project in history. The plan is essentially here. Let me find the really good article. There's an article from Workers World, which is the Workers World Party. Which like if for some reason you're like I don't trust them, but I'll trust the New York Times. Like what the fuck is wrong with you? Of course, there has been a ton of negative press about the One Belt One Road initiative, which some people refer to it as like the New Silk Road project, and even like in China itself, I saw a lot of when I saw information talking about the One Belt One Road initiative, there was kind of that harken back to the days of the Silk Road, because it was kind of this big economic belt.
Yeah.
So the road, it's this two-pronged approach where 29 heads of state from over 130 countries, or no, 29 heads of state and representatives from over 130 countries have attended these conferences or these summits on the One Belt One Road initiative. The belt part of it is the economic belt, which is land route development from central China to places in Central Asia, like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, that kind of thing, to places like Iran, Turkey, and even Eastern Europe. And the road refers to maritime roads. So, like ports and coastal infrastructure, not just in China itself, but building it up in Southeast Asia and East Africa and the Mediterranean. So we're talking about new rail lines, new ports, highways, pipelines, telecommunications, energy centers, and this is taking place on like 4 continents.
Nice.
And it
Yeah.
all sounds hella imperialist. Well, and China's calling it the plan of the century, and from a Western lens, yeah, it sounds very imperialist, but I want to Roland Bower, he's, talked about the One Belt, One Road initiative. I just refer to it as the Belt and Road Initiative. But he quotes a Dutch phrase, which is, a thief always thinks everyone else is a thief. In other words, like, of course, the West, Western Europe, and the United States are going to be worried and calling China a new colonial or imperialist power, because that's all that they know in terms of like dealing with other countries. It's projected to be 12 times the size of the U.S. Marshall Plan, which rebuilt Western Europe after World War II. This is from the Workers' World article. Former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense Charles Freeman described the Belt and Road Initiative as potentially the most transformative engineering effort in human history. China will become the center of economic gravity as it becomes the world's largest economy. The Belt and Road program includes no military components, but it clearly has the potential to upend the world's geopolitics as well as its economics. And this is from This is from an interview by NBC News.
Wow.
So but
famous communist news outlet NBC.
According to
nothing but commies.
Von Mises
That's what it stands
Institute.
for. Although according to
yep.
some right wingers, I bet they actually believe that.
Oh yeah.
But
the only fair and balanced news source is Fox News.
It's Fox. Is Breitbart.
God,
but fucking
help me. Have you ever read a Breitbart article? It's incredible.
I did once, and I was like, "How is this?" I quoted that Memory TV screenshot where it's like, "By God, if you call this journalism, I will shoot myself right here."
No, I read a Breitbart article and like demons manifested in my home. It was terrible.
Some people call it right-wing BuzzFeed, and I was like, "Oh, it's worse."
Oh God,
it's far worse. There's not even any like fun little quizzes where you can be like, "Which alt-right figure are you?" Take this little fucking quiz. There's nothing like that. You don't have that fun shit. I wish we had.
No, it's all bad. 100% bad.
I would never. I read one article by them, and I was like, I can't.
No.
I won't even give them the traffic. But to get back to it, the no military component is a very vital and interesting part of this. And like I said earlier, it's all about mutual benefit. Like the Chinese, I've read a couple things by. This is kind of moving more into Africa, but a lot of Africans view Chinese loans and Chinese investment and Chinese, involved like economic activity and projects and that kind of thing much more favorably than Western ones.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's part of that is because with like the World Bank and the IMF and that kind of thing, there are all these strings attached to their loans.
Yep.
Like you have to change this about how you govern things. You have to change this about how you govern things. Like basically a ton of governmental changes are required of these, developing countries, and the IMF or the World Bank will say, if you don't do what we say, we're going to pull out, and your country's going to fucking collapse.
Yeah.
We should do.
If you want to read like a terribly written book that has a lot of great knowledge in it, there's a book called Economic Hitman, which is about this exact.
Confessions of an Economic
Confessions,
Hitman?
Confessions.
I've heard good things, but like it seems like it's not. Well, I don't know. It's not like a communist book.
No.
If you want to read a communist book about this, you should read The Poor Nations by Vijay Prashad. He talks about structural adjustment programs.
So my plug to this book is not that it's a revolutionary book.
No, absolutely.
Dude is actually like he's anti-crony capitalist, so he's basically like a libertarian.
Right.
But he did it. He isn't just writing about it. He
was
lived
one of them.
it.
Yeah.
And so you get these personal anecdotes. He's a shitty writer, so like the stories are garbage. But
he's a libertarian.
Right. But he lived
twice.
These stories. He isn't just like reading articles about them and writing about it. He was literally one of these people, so it's really like a very informative.
I definitely
how China is not imperialist.
Right.
No, I would definitely and that kind of goes, you're talking about like Russia or, being the great threat. I wouldn't say the U.S. sees Russia as a threat. I think I should say former Secretary of Defense Mattis, not that long ago, he said something like China is the greatest threat to U.S. national security. Like those are the words he used, but obviously he means like hegemony.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he means.
There's been like Trump has talked a lot about like Chinese spies and that kind of thing, and there have been Chinese students in the United States who have been detained or have even been like denied visas and passports and shit because it's like, oh, how do we know you're not a spy and that kind of thing. Like there's all these accusations of spying by the U.S. and China, which is ironic because if you read Chinese media, they keep arresting all these CIA people in China.
Right.
So it's like, you fuckers. It's like some, I don't know.
Did
But
we talked about this, I think it was on the Dad episode, wasn't it? The
We were
dialectics
talking about
after
Huawei.
Yeah, we were talking about Huawei.
yeah, definitely.
Which is a weird, so
Yeah,
There's
fucking
weird
weird.
shit going on there.
Do you have you heard about the fire in the factory? Was it in the Netherlands or was it
It was somewhere in Europe.
somewhere
yeah.
in Europe?
No.
Yeah. So the we already talked about this on Dad, but for patrons, since this is a non-patron episode, you all get to hear this knowledge.
Woo!
So there was the person, the executive from Huawei who was arrested in Canada by Canadian authorities at the behest of the United States, right?
Yes.
And that was sort of a one-off weird thing. Bad, obviously, because the U.S. government is telling other governments what to do. Shocking. But then there was a scientist, a Huawei engineer, who supposedly threw himself off the top of a building in the same
As you
period
do.
of a few months. And this one factory which produces like
Was it
superconductors or something for cell phones.
Chips,
Yeah, chips for cell phones, for U.S. companies, for Korean companies, and for Chinese companies. And at the time that they were meant to be putting out this massive order for Chinese cell phone manufacturers, a fire broke out in their factory. And it turns out that Samsung, I forget which U.S. company is Apple or somebody, and then Huawei are all in this rush to develop this new sort of technology for cell phones. I'm not a cell
It's like a new
phonologist
kind of superconductor.
here, but yeah, it's some sort of like a new technology that's supposed to like massively improve the performance of cell phones, and they're all trying to rush their version to the market. And so the if you want to get conspiracy theory about this, all three of those events are related to the U.S. trying to get out in front of Huawei in terms of getting their cell phone to the market.
No,
Which
absolutely.
is spooky.
So,
Yeah. The free market and all that shit.
yeah. So I wanna. So we have another segment coming up, but so just to finish off this discussion, are there? I guess briefly, could you describe why you think it's important to support China as a Marxist-Leninist in 2019
Oh, damn.
when
The
this
year of our
episode's
Lord.
coming out? Yes.
In the year of our Lord.
Anno Domini.
Our Lord Xi Jinping. Got to plug that in there really quick.
Yeah.
Well, I think it really can be summed up in what I could be wrong about saying Mattis. It could have been John Bolton, but someone from the Department of Defense of the United States at the end of 2017 said China is the number one threat to the United States. That's not to say China is the aggressor. Obviously, they're not, but
Right.
they are right now the only thing keeping us from a unipolar order.
Yes.
Is the
Yeah.
Chinese
True.
state perfect? Absolutely not. Are they
No.
full communists? Absolutely not. Even I would say they're more state capitalist. But that's not to say that we should hope
Ty,
that they
you're
get
breaking
thrown under
up.
the bus. What?
Oh, we're losing the feed. What? Sorry, just kidding.
But that's not to
So
say.
according to my really quick Google search, it's FBI Director Chris Wray.
Oh, who said that? Well, fuck me. I don't know anything. Well, I knew it was someone who
It's
said it.
nobody.
It was at the end of 2017.
Low
But,
energy Chris Ray.
Never heard of him.
But like for all of its flaws, for all of the shit that they're doing that I think they should do differently, because even I think that there's things they should do differently. Even for all of that, they are probably the number one pillar standing against complete U.S. neoliberal domination.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you look at what neoliberalism has brought us, in terms of like, you've got 8 people own more than the bottom half of the world's wealth. Or there's a higher concentration of wealth of like the top 8 people than like the bottom half of the world's population
Yeah.
collectively has. Not only that, you're getting all these, reports from the UN saying like, well, we're all environmentally fucked in a few decades.
right.
And that's all from this mentality of, well, fuck it, let's just let the market do its thing. That's not to say China doesn't have a market. They absolutely do, but it has always been under the auspices or the, control of the Communist Party.
Right.
That's not to say there haven't been excesses. There have, but, you know, it's not like China is a rigid country where everything stays the same. It's constantly changing. It's a very dynamic country.
It's
Like I said at the
dialectical.
beginning, one of the things that impressed me about China was how dynamic and constantly changing it is, how diverse it is, not just in terms of like the people, but like ideas and how things are managed and governed and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like I said earlier, they are studying Marxism more than any other country in the world right now. Marxism is definitely something that they give a shit about. And, if they go down, what does that do for the world proletariat? What happens
Nothing
to
good.
say,
I hope we never have to find out.
yeah, exactly. Like that's like not even just like look at China itself. That's 1.3 billion people. Like look at what happened to the Soviet Union when it went away and put that in 1.3 billion people. Like the Soviet Union's population was not that big. It was
And
big, but it was not
Millions
1.3
of
billion
people
people.
died. I mean,
Yeah,
like it's
exactly.
not a
We would
what's
have
the red hangover or whatever,
catastrophic refugee crisis.
right?
Yeah.
Not to mention suicides. There would probably be. I bet there would be ethnic conflict.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because China has over 50 different recognized ethnicities. I'm sure that would fucking explode like it did in Yugoslavia.
Right.
So it would be like that fucking SpongeBob meme where you've got like two Western leftists standing there like, we did it, we saved China, as everything's fucking burning and collapsing all
Right.
around
Right.
them.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it would be like. So, and someone on Twitter, I don't remember who it was, they made a good point. Like a country doesn't have to fit your exact definition of socialism for you to say, I hope it doesn't fucking collapse. Over 80% of the population says, I'm
Oh,
glad of the
they're
government and where
brainwashed.
it's
Ty.
going.
They're brainwashed.
So if anything, it'd be like, when Yeltsin took power, you had these massive armed demonstrations in the street where they tried to storm the parliament building.
Right.
And there were dudes in tanks with like fucking Soviet flags. You would see that in China, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
You would see portraits of Mao and people carrying Communist Party flags and there would be like riots and shit. So don't tell the Chinese that you know what they want better than they do.
So we haven't done this. We haven't done this in a while, but we have a segment called "Seeing Red,"
Oh God.
Oh Lord.
where we pick the most obnoxious hot takes that the dark caverns of the internet has to offer, and we read them to our comrades in an attempt to evoke the purest form of proletarian rage. So,
This is torture. This should not be fucking legal.
Oh no! You're dragged into this. You're a guest on Proles Pod.
yeah,
You're part of the.
You consented to
Yeah,
this.
The
sorry.
Chinese would not do this to me.
It was part of the contract.
Yeah, exactly. You remember that big paperwork, that big folder of paperwork we sent you?
You know what? I've seen some pretty hot takes. You know what? I'm gonna regret saying this, but how bad can it be?
Oh.
I mean,
Oh, I'm
yeah,
so
I don't
bad.
know.
myself for saying
I'm
that.
sure there are worse ones than the ones I've got, but so I found a couple here.
I'm
from,
bracing myself. I'm bracing it.
I've found so all of the takes I'm going to read here are from the Chapo Trap House subreddit.
Oh no!
Oh my
on
god,
Reddit.
that's low hanging fruit. Come on.
No, it's okay. It'll be good.
What
It'll be
have
all
you
right.
done?
So here's one from Silent Protagonist.
Interesting name. Is he Gordon
Said-
Freeman?
They say, it's also incredibly awful advertising when leftists defend China. Yeah, we have an alternative to a society in which a small elite rules over a massive underclass living in squalor kept in check by a police state and fueled by environmental destruction. A society in which a small elite rules over a massive underclass living in squalor kept in check by a police state and fueled by environmental destruction with Chinese characteristics.
Oh,
Great, sign me
no.
the fuck up.
Oh no!
Wow.
Imagine using advertising in your critique of a quote unquote socialist state.
Jesus fucking Christ!
Has this person been there?
I'm certain not.
Certain
Have they
not.
go up to Chinese people and be like, "What do you think?"
Listen,
They were the tourists that you were talking to.
Do you want the government to collapse? Please say yes, so I can get Reddit clout.
No, listen. This person saw something really interesting on CNN, and
Oh wow,
no, yeah, it's bad. Okay, so then there's another one from our own Shoegaze Jezza.
What?
Not me.
No, it's not you.
it's
just-
not me. I promise.
Jezza is
I don't.
British for
I
Jeremy.
don't go into Reddit
I know, I
because
know.
it's a cursed place.
It is.
Wait,
You
is
think
this,
you're
is this a
on
take
I
from
am on
Corbin
Facebook.
himself?
No,
Yeah,
no,
this is from
Oh.
Jeremy Corbin. Shoegaze
Really, the
Jezza.
man himself.
Jesus.
Yeah, no, don't go to Reddit. Only madness that way lies.
Only madness.
No, they say tankies who like Xi Jinping because they think socialism is when you're authoritarian with red flags, and the more authoritarian you are, the more socialist your country is.
Jesus Christ.
What even is? Oh my God! What's authoritarianism?
That's
That's
the
a
thing.
really good question.
That's a great question. Nobody knows what it means.
What is authoritarianism?
What are you gonna do with everyone who fought against you post-revolution? What
Yeah.
happens the day after?
I mean,
Yeah.
no one has an answer to that. I mean, some people are like, "Oh, well, we'll just shoot everybody," which
What
is
you'll
like,
do
Is
you'll
that
drive
not
down
authoritarian?
Into the local villages, and you'll be like, "Come on, comrades, let's build new
we're
ones."
redistributing apartments.
That's fucking Kropotkin.
Kropotkin, conquest of
Kropotkin.
bread. No, but I mean, that's the thing about authoritarianism is, yeah, people talk about like, oh yeah, the Soviet Union authoritarian, China's authoritarian. Like,
Yeah.
what is that? Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Okay. I got another one from Space Moose One, who has the flare FALGSC, which is fully automated luxury gauge space communism.
Okay.
So they love the DSA.
Go watch fucking ContraPoints, dude.
So this is China is the production arm of the American empire.
What?
Holy fucking shit! Wow,
That's a hot ass take. That
tell
just
them
melted
that.
my face.
And then someone Attack Bastion with the Attack Bastion responded, literally though, how can a country be secretly or overtly woke if it props up one of the cruelest and most far-reaching empires in history? I've never gotten a straight answer to that question from any ML.
Wait, what?
They're saying
that
China props up the US by building all our shit.
It's a hot
Oh,
ass
boy.
take.
Well, I mean,
That's a lot.
That's spicy. My mouth is burning right now.
you
Yeah.
think that if that were the case, the U.S. would be a lot friendlier to China, and
you'd
wouldn't
think
be
so.
constantly be like, these fuckers are ruining everything for us. And isn't it like it's not even the American government that's doing it? Like, yeah, there's Western capital that has a big stake in China, but they've been shrinking.
Yeah.
And if anything, there was a recent article that came out that said foreign investors are fleeing China. You know, because the state is
Because
starting to
it's getting
come in
too
and be
expensive.
more like, hey, you fuckers need to start, realizing that you're not the ones in charge here. It's not like America where you can just, put up policy proposals and be like, fund super PACs and that kind of shit. Like, they have no super PACs in China. There are no Koch brothers. That kind of thing. That's not to say that the contradiction of, having foreign capital in that country doesn't exist, and that the foreign, especially the Western capitalists, are doing everything they can to get as much power as they can and skirt as many laws as they can. But whenever you read about like entrepreneurs coming back from China, or like them talking about, like, whenever they have like op-ed pieces or editorials on like big Western newspapers like the New York Times, are always like, oh, the fucking Chinese right up with their authoritarian bullshit,
Yeah.
not letting me exploit their workers as much as I want to.
Yeah, there
So-
was an article I read just like last week or maybe 2 weeks ago that was like entrepreneurs coming back from China disillusioned. Like they had left the United
Yeah.
States to go there to start businesses, and they were like, "Whoa, it wasn't as easy as I was expecting it to be."
Yeah,
so they
there's
came back
fucking
home.
rules and shit. I have
Oh
to.
wow, yeah.
The
Shame
government
pay my
actually
workers.
listens to the trade unions.
And entrepreneur, by the way, is basically just an innuendo for the children of rich kids or rich parents.
Oh,
is,
absolutely, trust fund
is-
babies.
Yep, I mean that's all they are.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, I got another
Thank
one.
you, Chi. Very cool.
So this is from Veggies24. Who says
Specific number.
24 veggies.
It's actually Ethan.
It's me. I love veggies.
He is a
uh,
vegetarian.
that's
so
true,
this
that's
makes
true.
sense.
Me. China is a no. That's
Me.
the comment. This is the comment.
Me, Jinping.
No, this is it. Me. China is a production client state of the West with neoliberal policies performing imperialism in Africa that systematically oppresses Uyghurs and uses populist communism as a shield to their mega-rich classes. Also me. Daddy Xi Jinping, please barrel bomb Brooklyn. My country is dying.
What?
What?
Fuck off.
Is this
That
like the
was-
way to not have to pick a side? Like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like,
That's-
Yeah.
This is
Both
this is-
sides.
This is the
It's both sides.
This is the anarchist / trot / MLM slash.
I don't know what that is.
Wow, what the hell?
He said
everything
did he
except
say
ML.
barrel bomb the Bronx?
You're like,
Yeah,
I'm an anarchist, I'm a
barrel bomb
trot, I'm an
Brooklyn.
MLM,
barrel
but not an
bomb
ML.
Brooklyn.
Are,
damn.
so you're not on Twitter, so Jeremy, you're not on Twitter, so you're not
I was
familiar
gonna
with
say, yes, I am
Bana
on Twitter. Are you
Alabed.
fucking kidding me?
With who?
Bana Alabed.
No idea.
Oh
So-
my lord.
So it was this account from supposedly from like an 8-year-old like
Oh, yes.
Syrian girl.
No,
who
I
was
do
like,
know what that is.
Like Mr. Obama, please
Obama,
bomb
please
Syria
bomb us.
because.
And it turned out that her mom was the one who was basically like pushing her to say all this shit.
And then, well, I don't know the specifics, but all I know is that like, yeah, there were later pictures of her like hanging out in Turkey
Yes.
with Erdogan.
And they interviewed her, and she doesn't speak English very well.
yeah, exactly. It's
Because
ridiculous.
so clearly, but there was another one of those where it was like a little Syrian girl or a Syrian teenager who was gay, and she was like,
Oh,
please
yeah.
come and please come and rescue us, United States, we're dying here and we're being oppressed. And then it turned out it was like a middle-aged Scottish man
yeah,
who had been
Yeah.
posting it. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm a Syrian girl, you know.
Yeah. Aye.
Yeah.
Come kick this fucking Assad asshole.
Yep.
This
Basically.
right cunt Assad.
All right.
I
so
imagine
got-
that's
Shout
what
out
they
to
sound
Grant
like.
Phillips.
yes. Awesome. Or Leningrad student, is that him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
Okay.
lord.
So I got one more, and this is
The kicker.
more for the proles at the table. It's not as China related. So it's on the Chop on Trap
Tangentially.
House subreddit from No
course.
Gods No Senpais.
Oh
Um,
no.
Actually, you know what?
Oh,
I
hey,
kind of agree
Gabe.
with that username. Enough of this weeb shit.
Fuck
It's
the weeb
true.
shit.
We
Weeb
are
shit.
the
Someone-
official proles stance
Someone
is
said that
anti-weeb.
China banned anime, and I'm like, I fucking wish.
Yeah.
They just made a Karl Marx anime, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
It hasn't been released in English yet, but I don't think the full version has been released.
I'm looking
But
forward
they
to it.
released a trailer for it, and I'm like, there is one good anime, and it's not Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, damn, critical support for Cowboy Bebop. Okay,
I actually like that one. It's okay.
the Cowboy Bebop's theme song is called Tank. So
Yeah, it's socialist realism.
real shit. Okay,
That's King of the Hill.
okay, yeah. So that's it for that segment. Ty, thank you so much for coming on tonight to talk about China and just the state of the world right now. It was super interesting, super fascinating. It's given me a lot to think about, and I know it will for our listeners as well.
Yeah.
You can follow Ty on Twitter at Spirit of 17 and yeah, thank you so much for listening. Ty will give us some suggested reading that we'll put in the episode description in the show notes. And yeah, thanks so much, Ty.
Oh, thank you guys. I had a really awesome time. This is my first podcast that I've ever done, and I'm certainly not
Hopefully not
against
the
that
last.
kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. But I'm certainly not against that kind of thing or everything, but it was kind of nice to have my P card revoked on Proles of the Round Table. And,
God damn it.
well, I definitely look forward to interacting with people more about this kind of thing. I'd love to. I'm open to talking about other things in the future. I'd love to branch out and maybe start recording my own videos and that kind of thing. Like I do some
Nice.
writing every now and again on Medium, but
Absolutely.
not a whole lot. I'd love to do more writing on that though. But thank you all for the opportunity to come on here and say my piece. Hopefully I didn't bomb the entire
No,
fucking
no,
time
no,
and
it's
sound
great.
like
This
a
was great.
moron.
You did great.
Yeah, no, you
But,
did it. Yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah, I've got some friends in real life who are going to listen to this, and they're probably going to hate me because most of them are lib socks. But other
Hopefully,
than that, I've
let
had
this
a
radicalize you rather than let it lead you to despair. So I want to thank all of our our sponsors for all these episodes are our excellent fans on Patreon. We're gonna read them all right now. This is probably not going to continue because there are so many of you, so we're
now.
going to figure something else out. But for right now, we're going to do it.
As we mentioned before this episode was recorded, we literally thought maybe like 10 or 15 people might.
literally, no
we
joke.
thought.
But now we're
Yeah.
almost at 200. But anyway, we'll go through this. It'll just take a minute. Some of the names are funny. So listen. And then, yeah, some of the names have been changed, so they're good when the crackdown happens. So we got a nice smooth mouthfeel.
Jesus.
Aaron,
Go back to ContraPoints.
No, hey, I support a nice smooth
I'm
mouthful
sorry.
because
I'm
they
sorry.
give us money.
They're good. You're a good person. I like you.
Aaron, Vaichung, Ace Sox, Adrian, Alex, other Alex, third Alex, Alexa play Despacito, Alice, Anna, Anthony, Arturo, Evadis, Spike, Banan, Barcode Reader, Benjamin, Bennett, BDEF, Bill, Brandon, the other Brandon, Brendan, Brock, Bryn, Cage433, Caleb, Cameron,
Whoa.
Casey, Kat, Cedar, Cesar, Chase, Chiron, or Chiron, I'm not sure. Christoph, Clayton, Kami Party Hats, Commissar Taco, Commissaurus Rex, Comrade Benj, Comrade Ice Pick, Comrade Red Robin, Dan, other Dan, Daniel, Danny, David, Dawn, Dean, other Dean, Diego, Donald, Dylan, Eat Jeff Bezos, Eric, other Eric, Ethan, not me, Ethan, still not me, Ewan, Felix. That's wild that there are 2 Ethans supporting us, and then that's my name. Cool.
There's other Ethan.
Anyway, Ewan, Felix, Florian, Francis, our filthy comrade, Gaius Gracchus. Those are 2 different people.
Yeah,
Gaius Gracchus is not our filthy comrade. Garrett, Grant, Greg, other Greg, Guillermo, Hyder's Cult of Personality, Hudson, Hidden File, Ewan, J Bones, J Martell, JH Wolf, JW, Jace, Jack, Jacob, Jake, other Jake, James, other James, the third James, Janet, Jarl Marks, Jason, Jedi Davian, Jem, Jeremiah, Jesse, other Jesse, Jocelyn, John, Johnny, Joe, Joey Stalinovich, Josh, other Josh, the gay one, Joshua, the other Joshua, the third Joshua,
Jesus.
Justice Dab, Justin, not that one, other Justin, still not that one, the third Justin, yeah, it's still not
That
So
our
one.
many
Justin.
Justins.
Yeah, I know. Kinsey, Kieran, Liam, Lightning, Linus, Liz, Logan, Magnus, Mark, Marlon, Marshall, Martin, Massimo, other Matthew. Oh, sorry, there's Matthew, other Matthew, and then the third Matthew. Mattia, Mexican Stalin,
My favorite.
I like that one.
Michael, Mike, Mitchell, Mobin, Morgan, Nathan, Nicholas, Pablo, Paul, other Paul, Peter, other Peter, Petter, Philip, Proletariat Marks, Quentin, Radio Blur, Raphael, Rain, Randall, Real Joe Rogan, Reed,
Oh.
You'll done DMT, Revolutionary Left Radio, Rico,
Heyo.
RN Hornets, Russian Posadist, Ryan, Sabak Kitty, Sajid, Sal, Samuel, Sebastian, Sel, Sean, Silverwit, Tadici, Talia, Talking Socks, the Cardinal Cadre, the Proletariat, just the entire
Wow.
proletariat.
The
All of
entire
us,
one.
yeah,
Good
it's
job,
awesome.
guys.
Thomas, Tim, Thalman, Trauma Lee, Unironic Stalinist,
Heyo.
Vincent,
I recognize some of those.
Violet, Virginia, Walter, William, and Zachary. All these people are heroes of the revolution, and they make it so much easier for us to make this podcast for you. No, like literally all this money goes straight back into the podcast.
Literally.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
pocket.
You're all
any
getting
of this.
statues in towns named after you.
Yes, exactly.
Eventually, yeah, we'll get
Yeah,
around
we'll
to it.
have Violet grad, Thomas grad,
Amelie grad and shit. and,
Mexican
Talia
Stalingrad.
grad, Mexican Stalingrad.
Yeah, Mexican Stalingrad's my favorite.
Yes, this is
That's
good.
Mexico City will be renamed.
Not actually in
Mexican Stalingrad.
Mexico.
True.
Unironic Stalingrad. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
a good
so
one.
please don't forget to rate and review on your favorite podcast app. Like us on Facebook.com/ProlesPod. Follow us on Twitter @ProlesPod. Once again, we do have a website, as I mentioned at the beginning. So there's a lot of cool shit there. Check it out. If you have any feedback, topic ideas, or suggestions, feel free to send us an email at prolespod@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Solidarity forever.
Yo, Red Salute to Ransom Notes. This is for the people. Fuck the US of America. 谁是朋友，谁是敌人？我们能否追究这问题而不自欺欺人？谁的盟友，谁的利润？是谁基于一份而争斗和牺牲？谁是朋友，谁是敌人？我们能否追究这问题而不自欺欺人？ 谁的盟友，谁的利润，是谁基于一份而争斗和牺牲？饶舌的激进分子被说是愤世，我只想引人深思，何去为存世？因为从小到大有太多虚伪人士灌输错误认识，使人愚昧无知的无视显而易见的压迫和暴行，使人固执己见，失去批判思考力。一旦遇到陌生的意见，认知就失调，变本加厉的延伸原本的错误视角，成为了心理防御机制，也使我们无意识的成为压迫自己的体制的棋子。即使我们自以为自己是正义的意识，但其实是我们迷失于断章取义的历史，而敌视并歧视被压迫的各国人民，自以为仁义，却把压迫者奉若神明。不分明侵略和防御，只要求无条件的和平，得到奴隶主的肯定，不我不被他们尊敬。谁是朋友，谁是敌人？我们能否追究这问题而不自欺欺人？谁的盟友，谁的利润，是谁基于一份而争斗和牺牲？谁是朋友，谁是敌人？我们能否追究这问题而不自欺欺人？谁的盟友，谁的利润，是谁基于一份而争斗和牺牲？检举率最高的国家被当作自由象征，最常推翻民选政府的他被当作自由良朋。我们只有盲人莫想般称颂或辨识偏执的不见识，骗子掩饰的现实，别人饥饿，我们说是领导人无人性，却不记得制裁的目的是经过饿死人民，破坏稳定，以迫使革命群众放弃革命。如果这不是恐怖主义，那么你的定义肯定有问题。我问你，唯一动用核武器的到底是谁？为何朝鲜发展核武就被认为是罪？谁的奴性思维被支配的颠倒是非？是我们把自卫视为威胁，把威胁视为慈悲？是谁不知不觉的在重复戈佩尔所起草的流言蜚语的同时，说别人被洗脑，并对用着坚如铁的毅力英勇的起义驱逐侵略者的人民无理的怀有敌意？谁是朋友，谁是敌人？我们能否追究这问题而不自欺欺人？谁的盟友，谁的利润，是谁基于一份而争斗和牺牲？
I mean, we've got Amazon workers peeing in bottles.
Yeah, and I mean,
Which is a bigger tragedy than millions.
Yeah, millions of people who died in the purges,
Yes.
according to Comrade Bryce Carmody.
oh Lord.
Bryce Carmody come on Proles Pod.
No.
You don't have to be on that episode. I'll do it.
Yeah, we'll interview Bryce. We should do like a special segment for our
For the
first hater.
patrons.
For like the
Our first
anniversary
hater.
episode.
Yes, let's get Bryce on. Let's get Bryce on for the anniversary episode.
Amazing.